Steve Williams was built like a tank, respected like a legend, and feared in the ring. But behind the power and the pain was a man fighting demons way bigger than any opponent. Steve was a monster in the ring, not in a villain way, just in how dominant and tough he was. He started out as an amateur wrestling and football star. The guy was built like a tank and had legit athletic skill to back it up. He found his biggest success in Japan during the 90s. Fans there loved him. He wasn't just another American wrestler passing through. He became a real main event star, one of the most respected foreign wrestlers they'd ever seen. In All Japan Pro Wrestling, he was unstoppable. He had brutal matches that fans still talk about. But outside of the ring, Steve was dealing with a lot. And sadly, some of those battles were bigger than anything he ever faced in wrestling. By the late 1980s, Steve's issues with drugs were already serious. In 1988, he got caught with a crazy mix of stuff, enough that you'd expect jail time. But because it was his first offense, he just got a warning. That alone tells you how different things were back then, not just in law enforcement, but also in wrestling culture. Things got worse in 1995. After his divorce, Steve said he turned to drugs and painkillers to deal with the depression. It all came to a head when he tried to take drugs with him on a flight to Japan. He got caught and was banned from entering the country for a year. That was a massive blow. Japan wasn't just a paycheck, it was where he felt respected and at home. He had a deep connection with the fans and with AJPW's founder, Giant Baba, who he looked up to like a father. Without Japan, Steve had to take a step back and get his life together. To his credit, he did. With help from Baba, he got clean and made his return to wrestling in 1996. It was a turning point. He was back in Japan, sober, and still able to perform at a high level. For a while, it looked like he might finally get some peace. But the drug problems didn't just go away overnight. He had other arrests in the US, mostly at airports, including one in Texas where they found prescription drugs he hadn't declared. These things kept popping up and showed that, even though he was working on getting better, the struggle was still there. What makes Steve's story especially tragic is how much of his addiction was tied to the wrestling lifestyle. Wrestlers then were constantly on the road. They were injured, exhausted, and under pressure to keep performing. If you didn't work, you didn't get paid. So a lot of them turned to painkillers just to make it through matches, and other drugs to handle the loneliness or stress. Steve was far from the only one. One wrestler once said, "Pills are what killed these guys. They were everywhere." That was the culture, and it's no surprise so many of them didn't make it to old age. But this wasn't his only controversy. He has more to his name. It happened back in 1993, during a match with Kenta Kobashi in Japan. This wasn't just any match. It turned into a moment that fans still remember, and not just because it was exciting. It was dangerous, like really dangerous. The match took place in All Japan Pro Wrestling. Steve was already a big name by then. He was known for being strong, tough, and kind of terrifying in the ring. Kobashi was still on the rise. He had heart, he had fire, and the fans loved him. So when these two faced off, people were expecting a great match, and they got one. But it also crossed a line. Back then, Japanese wrestling had something called the King's Road style. What that meant was the matches were long, hard-hitting, and super realistic. Wrestlers didn't just pretend to hit each other. They actually hit each other. The matches looked and felt real, and the wrestlers went through a lot of pain to make it that way. During the match, Steve used a move called the backdrop driver. Now this move is no joke. You grab your opponent from behind, lift them up, and slam them straight down on their neck and shoulders. It's risky every single time, but this time it was way too much. Steve hit Kobashi with the move, and it looked brutal. Kobashi landed straight down, almost face first. He didn't move right away. It looked like he was knocked out cold. The announcer even yelled "Abanai," which means dangerous in Japanese. Everyone in the crowd was holding their breath. It didn't look like part of the show. It looked real. It looked scary. And then somehow Kobashi kicked out. He got back up. The crowd lost it. People were shocked. But instead of stopping, Steve hit him with the move again. And then a third time after that. Each one looked worse than the last. Kobashi somehow kept going, crawling toward the ropes, trying to stand. Nobody knew if he was trying to keep fighting or just trying to survive. It was one of those moments where you realize just how far wrestlers go to make a match look real. And yeah, it made the match exciting. The fans were totally into it, but it also made people think, was it worth the risk? Kobashi didn't get paralyzed that night, but he could have. He was lucky. A little more force, a slightly different landing, and it could have ended his career, or worse. That's how close it came. The crazy thing is, people still call that match a classic. And it was. It told a great story. It made Kobashi look like a hero who could take anything. It made Steve look like a monster who wouldn't stop. But looking back, it also shows how dangerous wrestling can be when there are no limits. And that's part of what happened during that era. Wrestlers were always trying to top each other. Bigger moves, harder hits, more pain. Because when fans cheered for those big moments, it pushed wrestlers to do more. It created this pressure to be tougher, to be crazier, to take risks. Not long after, another wrestling legend, Mitsuharu Misawa, died in the ring after taking a move just like that. It was the same style, the same kind of risk. That was the wake-up call. Wrestling needed to change, and it has. Today, you don't see moves like that as often. Promotions are more careful. There are rules and safety checks. Wrestlers are trained to protect themselves and each other. The focus is still on great matches, but with more care and less danger. And just when you thought the drama was over, life threw another curveball in Steve's way. In 1998, Steve signed with WWF. The company was excited to have him. He had a great reputation, and they thought he could be a major star. They even had big plans to build him up and put him in a feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin, who was the top guy at the time. It all sounded great. To start building him up, they put Steve in something called the Brawl for All. Now, this wasn't a normal wrestling tournament. It was real fighting. No scripts, no planned winners, just guys throwing punches, taking each other down, and trying not to get knocked out. The idea was that Steve would win the whole thing, look like a legit fighter, and then move on to a big match with Stone Cold. But it didn't go that way. In the second round, Steve had a match with Bart Gunn, and Bart surprised everyone. He took Steve down, hurt his leg, and then knocked him out. Just like that, Steve was out of the tournament, and just like that, the big plans for him fell apart. The Brawl for All was a mess. A lot of guys got hurt. Fans didn't like it. Even people inside the company said it was a bad idea. After Steve lost, the company didn't seem to know what to do with him anymore. His push was basically dead. After that, Steve was put in a few random storylines. He wore a mask once and attacked Bart Gunn to get some payback. He also went after the hardcore title for a bit. There were a few small feuds, but nothing big. He was even paired up with Jim Ross for a while. Ross, who was a real-life friend of Steve, tried to get him more TV time. There was even a segment where Triple H attacked Jim Ross on TV, and that was supposed to be the moment that kicked off the feud. But it never happened. The whole thing just fizzled out. By April 1999, Steve was let go from WWF. The reason given was that he needed more time to heal from his injuries. There were also reports that he didn't want to work with the Japanese company WWF was working with. Whatever the reason, he was out. A lot of people said Steve was wasted. He had so much talent, but WWF didn't use him the right way. Some said his style didn't fit with what the company was doing at the time. This was during the Attitude Era, when guys were doing wild things, cutting long promos, and being over the top. Steve wasn't that kind of guy. He was serious, tough, and quiet. He didn't do big speeches or flashy moves. He just fought. Some people also thought he was already worn down by that point. He had been through years of hard matches in Japan. His body had taken a beating. Maybe he just didn't have much left. Others said he didn't connect with American fans the way he did in Japan. And that's fair. The audiences were different. In Japan, fans respected his toughness. In WWF, fans wanted loud, wild, crazy energy. Steve wasn't that. But it wasn't just Steve's fault. World Wildlife Fund didn't help him much either. They put him in that Brawl for All, which was never a good fit for a guy who was already dealing with injuries. They didn't protect him after the loss. They didn't give him the kind of stories that could help fans understand who he was. Looking back, Steve's WWF run is one of those what could have been stories. He had the skills. He had the name. He had the respect. But the timing was off. The style was wrong. and the company didn't have the patience to make it work. In the end, Steve went back to Japan, where fans still loved him. But the chance to become a big star in the US was gone, and that's a shame. Because if things had gone differently, Steve Williams might be remembered very differently today. Now we come to the final chapter in Steve Dr. Death Williams' story, and honestly, it's the toughest one to talk about. It wasn't a wrestling match that brought Steve down. It wasn't another injury or bad booking decision. It was something much more painful and much more real. In 2004, Steve was diagnosed with throat cancer, and that's when his hardest fight began. The cancer had likely been growing since late 2003, but Steve didn't know. By the time doctors found it, the tumor in his neck was the size of a golf ball. He started intense treatments right away. Radiation, chemotherapy, everything they could throw at the cancer. It was brutal. These treatments knocked his weight down from 295 pounds to just over 200. That's nearly 100 pounds gone. For a man who had built his life and career around being strong and powerful, it was a huge hit. But Steve wasn't done, not even close. In 2004 and into 2005, he went through major surgery to remove the cancer. Part of that surgery involved removing his voice box. After that, he had to breathe through a hole in his throat, called a stoma. That meant no more natural voice, no more yelling, no more promos, no more growls in the ring. To speak, he had to use a device called an electrolarynx. He'd press it to his throat and talk in a rough, robotic voice. It wasn't easy, but it gave him a way to communicate. And even after all that, things still got worse. Just a few months after the surgery, the skin around the stoma broke open. The radiation had weakened it. He needed more surgery to fix the damage. This time, doctors took muscle from his thigh to repair the area. 2.5 feet of muscle, to be exact. Most people would have called it quits, but not Steve. In March 2005, he got some good news. He was officially cancer-free. That same month, he showed the world how he was still fighting. At an event, he came out, held up his electrolarynx, and spoke to the crowd. It wasn't the voice they remembered, but it was still Steve, still full of heart. And then, believe it or not, he went back to wrestling. That summer, he showed up in All Japan Pro Wrestling again, even while recovering. And by August 2005, he was officially back in the ring. It wasn't like the old days. He wasn't as strong or fast as before, but he was there, still giving everything he had. It showed what kind of man he was. He didn't let cancer define him. But sadly, the fight wasn't over. In 2009, the cancer came back. This time, it was too much. His longtime friend and rival, Mitsuharu Misawa, passed away in the ring after an in-ring accident. Misawa's death shook the wrestling world. For Steve, it was personal, it was heartbreaking. That loss, combined with the return of his cancer, marked the end of his in-ring journey. Steve had his final wrestling match on October 25th, 2009. Just 2 months later, on December 29th, he passed away. He was only 49 years old. Even after everything, Steve stayed strong. He didn't give up, not once. He adjusted to life without a voice box. He learned to speak in a new way. He lived with daily challenges, difficulty swallowing, higher risk of infections, loss of taste and smell, but he kept moving forward. He also changed. Cancer had a deep impact on him, not just physically, but spiritually. He became a devout Christian. He started doing Christian motivational speaking, sharing his story to help others. He even changed his nickname. He stopped calling himself Dr. Death. From then on, he was Doctor. Life that was his way of saying, I'm still here, I'm still living, and I'm not done yet. He also wrote a book called How Dr. Death Became Dr. Life. In it, he talked about his journey, his battles in the ring, his fight with cancer, and how faith gave him strength. It wasn't just a wrestling book, it was a story about survival. When Steve passed, the wrestling world mourned. Jim Ross, who had been one of his closest friends, said Steve had unmatched toughness and a heart of gold. John Bradshaw Layfield said something that stuck with a lot of people. He talked about how the wrestling lifestyle in their era was rough. Painkillers were everywhere. Injuries were common. Many wrestlers didn't make it. Layfield made it clear that Steve's death was caused by cancer, not pills. But he also said the lifestyle had taken a toll on so many guys, and Steve's story reminded everyone of that. In 2020, WWE honored Steve by inducting him into the Hall of Fame as part of the Legacy Wing. It was a quiet tribute, but a powerful one. For fans who followed his career, it meant a lot. Steve "Dr. Death" Williams was more than just a wrestler. He was a fighter. He battled in the ring, he battled addiction, he battled cancer. And through it all, he never gave up. Even when he lost his voice, even when the pain was constant, he kept going. His story isn't just about wrestling, it's about strength, it's about faith, it's about how even the toughest people can be knocked down, but not broken. He turned pain into purpose. And even though he's gone, his legacy is still with us. Thanks for watching. If Steve's story moved you, leave a comment and share your thoughts. If you've known someone who battled cancer, or you've faced tough times yourself, you're not alone. Steve Williams showed us that no matter how hard life hits, you keep fighting. Hit the like button, subscribe for more real stories like this, and we'll see you next time.